joining me for this conversation is Winston Osuchukwu, who is the co-founder of Trans-Sahara Incorporated. And I also have my guest host for today, Tilewa Adebajo. He's the head of and CEO of CFG Advisory. Thank you so much for your time on the show with us, Winston. But Winston, I'd like to first get your thoughts on the performance of the ministers so far, and by how much you think the COVID-19 pandemic would skew the metrics for measuring their delivery.
Thanks for having me. Well, any performance evaluation right now is severely colored by the severity of what has happened with COVID-19 and what it has done to the economy. At the very minimum, it is clear that the government has taken some of the necessary hard steps that we've always wanted them to take, which is things like removing the subsidy and introducing what are real market-driven tariffs in the power industry. But that being said, where we are is significantly far away from what should be acceptable in any country that is endowed with the level of riches and human capital that we have. So it's really tough to come out and give any kind of clear evaluation. The one thing I would say, though, it is very sad. It's really very sad and telling that we have the word "first" written on this, because this is the first time ministers are getting together in a retreat to go over their performance. This should be something that they should be doing on a consistent basis, but at least I guess we have to accept the good part that we have at least started.
Okay, Winston, when you take a look at growth, for instance, I think one of the most important things in the population of this country is 180 million people. Growth of the economy is really a key. Do you feel that we have clearly defined our key performance indicators, and what exactly are they measuring when they talk about performance?
So therein lies some of our problem is, if you look at that entire address, the one thing that did not come out up front, which is the one thing that everybody in this world has decided is certain that is required to make any planning, is any consistency in delivery of data. So for anybody to answer that question, it would depend on where the person stands on the political aisle. If you're in the opposition, you claim that growth has been slow and you pick your metric. If you are in the ruling party, you claim that growth has rebounded and you pick your metric. But if you look at from where everybody stands, the one thing that we know is the economy shrunk during COVID. Post that, the economy, based on the numbers that we got when we got them, was growing at about 2%, which is impossible. That level of growth is just anemic and is virtually zero when you adjust for the fact that the way we measure growth and the way that growth trickles down to the common man is very, very different.
All right, now let me bring in the economist here, Tilewa, and definitely talk about what this retreat or this will mean for the re-strategizing going forward for Nigeria, especially with the fact that the budget office yesterday iterated the fact that the new development plan, which is going to replace the ERGP, will be kicking off from January next year.
Yes, you find out that there's a plan on ground. They've talked about this economic transformation program, which, of course, as you said, replaced the economic recovery growth plan, which was completely way off. And now with the pandemic, I think they had to press the reset button, which they have done. The challenge I see is, where is the capacity to be able to implement this plan to ensure that the recession is not as bad as it is projected? And I think this is where the challenge the government is facing. And as I said earlier, a lot of all these reforms that we're seeing in terms of removing the subsidies and looking at market-driven tariffs in the power sector, I think is a very welcome development. But I think it's a conditionality for us getting the new funding that we require. So the way I project this is the fact that how we end up at the end of this year or next year, or how we recover, will depend on implementation of the budget and, of course, of this plan.
The government has said that they're trying to set a target where they're going to set the country on a path for prosperity, lifting 100 million people out of poverty in 10 years. But then we've always been talking about the tough decisions that the government needs to make to get this done. And when you look at what is happening with the fuel subsidies right now and the electricity hikes, do you think the government is on the right path at the end of the day in the long run?
Yes, I do. I think that now you're taking your medicine. you give us market-based rates, we start to see investment in the power sector. And what you will find is those investments in the power sector would force power to the productive parts of the economy. And the same thing will happen in fuel. If you go ahead and remove the fuel subsidy, then any normal, rational business person would be more than happy to start building refineries locally and be moving refined products instead of moving crude oil from Nigeria somewhere else because they are afraid of the market here. So these are things that are just the basic fundamentals that you have to do to change to set the environment for economy to start to move forward. And if there's one place where I think the labor unions have really sold their members short is in fighting these market-based pricing. Because when you fight market-based pricing and you continue to use subsidies, you restrict the growth in those areas as government becomes the only investor, because government's return requirements are variable and are based on things that sometimes don't show up on a balance sheet, which if you look back at what has happened with the refineries and what have you, it's clear why they have not succeeded. But again, the key part is we need to stop replacing and start executing, adjusting, and following the long-term plan. And those long-term plans, you make adjustments for things like COVID and what have you, but it should not change the fundamental long-term plan. If our long-term plan is to raise 100 million people out of poverty, that's what it should be for the next 20 or 30. That's what it should be until it's achieved. We would make strategic adjustments for changes in the environment, but not wholesale replacement of plants. I think that level of discontinuity does not do us any good.
All right, Tilewa, Winston says we're taking our medicine right now, but how long are we going to keep taking this medicine?
To use this analogy, the thing is that if you're going to take your medicine, then you need to be consistently taking your medication to be able to achieve the desired results. And I think one of the bane of Nigeria is inconsistency in policy implementation and the flip-flop that we tend to do. And that does not give the market the right signals, and it doesn't give the investors the right confidence to be able to stimulate investment in our economy. And you can see that all our capital importation numbers is dropping. Investment levels have been very low and poor. And the business confidence is very low because there's a lot of uncertainty. So if we begin to take this medicine, or if we begin to put in our policies and we show consistency in the level of our policies, then we will see the results in terms of increased investments and increased investor confidence and increased business confidence. And that is really what you need to grow an economy, confidence.
All right, Winston, when you look at what's playing out there, because I know Nigeria all too well, we've seen this happen quite before. Yes, the hikes in fuel prices are playing out now, electricity tariffs are happening now, but we're going to see the multiplier effect across the economy very soon with everybody also hiking up their prices. What's your take on this one, fear for this, an impact it's going to have on inflation?
Definitely, when you take a look at something of that situation, you find the fact that the price levels in the economy have not correct. And what tends to happen is that when you make these sort of corrections, you might think is an increase in price. But invariably, what happens is the fact that you're going to open up several sectors and productivity levels are going to increase significantly. So while you might begin to see that price effect initially in terms of maybe there might be a slight inflationary pressure on that, but the productivity and the expansion and the growth that you will achieve from removing all these restrictions, because the economy really over the years has been distorted. So if you need to remove these distortions, yes, you might see that price increase, but those price levels will be reflected, but then you will compensate on that with additional GDP growth, expansion of the power sector, which is a critical sector. And once you have stable power, then you can begin to see industrial output begin to go up, and you can begin to see things like productivity, employment levels begin to improve, and you see a general well-being in the economy. Then we can begin to see an economy that is growing at 8, 9, 10% per annum, and that will more than compensate for any price increases. Then you have an economy that the price levels are real, market-driven, and constant. Then you can begin to get sustained economic growth. That is what it's important. We cannot continue to restrict these subsidies. And of course, you know that the government is also operating on a deficit. So the trillions of naira they spend every year on subsidy, all of a sudden that money becomes available to government. And government can now begin to use that money towards social infrastructure such as health and education.